and welcome to Daily Debrief brought to you by People's Dispatch. I'm Pragya. Today we talk about the no confidence vote against UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson. A Spanish court summons former CIA Director Mike Pompeo, and Gulf countries are angry over tirade against Islam in India. The UK Prime Minister has survived a no confidence motion by 63 votes, but 148 of Boris Johnson's 359 Conservative MPs voted against him on Monday. The vote followed over a year of strong opposition to Johnson. The opposition peaked after the Partygate scandals involving parties held by top officials during the COVID-19 lockdown. We'll talk to Prashant from People's Dispatch about the vote. So Prashant, what led to this no confidence vote? It's something that has been brewing for a while now.
So this is basically what happened within the Conservative Party. So there's a provision that if a particular percentage of MPs writes to what is known as the 1922 Commission of the Conservative Party seeking, proposing a no confidence vote, they are bound to actually have that. And in this case, the number was 54. Those many letters were received by this committee. It's anonymous, the number of people who actually wrote to them. But there was a no confidence vote. So that's a technicality. Now, the larger issue that has been in which the government has been embroiled is really what is called Partygate. So Partygate basically refers to the fact that there were a number of parties held during in number 10 Downing Street, which is the residence of the office of the Prime Minister, and in some of the other government offices during the COVID-19 lockdown period. So over a period of a year or so, there was an inquiry into this, what is known as the Sue Gray report. They detailed 16 such incidents of parties taking place, which were in various, and there were a number of breaches of COVID protocol, a number of people who were apparently fined, including the Prime Minister and the Chancellor of Exchequer. So all in all, this revealed a very disturbing type of behavior on the part of the government, a very certain contempt for the people of the United Kingdom who they're supposedly governing, because throughout this time we had people who were not able to meet their families, who were not able to meet their loved ones, who were, who underwent a very severe lockdown. A lot of people experienced huge amounts of physical and mental stress, jobs, livelihoods, so much was affected. And then in between all this, there was the fact that the top officials in the country were partying, and the report details a culture of, it sounds almost like it's a college life, so to speak. And while it's maybe acceptable or even fun in college, the fact that at this point of time, senior officials were engaged in were basically having fun and frolicking when the rules were against it, and that there was a culture of cover-up, there was a culture of actually preventing people from raising such concerns, and that this went all the way to the very top was basically the issue. Now, once this report came out, Boris Johnson tried quickly to exonerate himself, said that, lessons have been learned, etc., etc. But this was, I think, somewhat a tipping point for a larger set of issues that have been plaguing the government. There's a huge loss of confidence. So Partygate, in that sense, is more of the face of what is a larger set of issues facing the government. It stands out because it brings into such contrast the disdain which the ruling classes have for the people of the United Kingdom. But that itself is not, there are an underlying series of issues as well. That has to do with cost of living, has to do with the crisis faced by working people, has to do with the kind of immigration policies. There are a variety of issues which basically pretty much keep coming back to the same theme, which puts this government at odds with the people. And Partygate became the most visible face of that discontent, of that anger, and a lot of polls that came after that indicated that people were very unhappy with Boris Johnson, indicated that Labour, which itself is no great progressive party, is actually leading over the Conservatives who are in complete tatters. So this is a larger context in which this vote took place. It's significant because the number of people who voted, MPs who voted against Johnson, his own party MPs, was quite high. I think it's 149 or something, which is, so I think he's won only 59% of support from his MPs, which is actually, if you compare to previous similar votes, it's actually one of the biggest defeats, one of the narrowest margins of such a no confidence vote. So people wondering whether Boris Johnson will actually stay till the next election, or whether, according to the rules, he's safe from a no confidence motion for 1 year. But the fact is, in the coming months, we're going to have the Parliamentary Privileges Committee, I believe, looking further into some of these Partygate-related issues. What fresh revelations they'll bring out, what fresh scandals they'll bring out is not clear. So Boris Johnson's position not really safe just because he's won this election. But forget what happens within the Conservative Party. The larger question here is of the massive discontent that is brewing in the United Kingdom due to the policies of the government.
Prashant, when we look at also what he could do now, Boris Johnson has said that he will present the conservative form of conservatism. What could he possibly mean by that?
Right. So a key indicator is the fact that throughout his comments after this no confidence motion yesterday, what kept coming across was his commitment to cut government spending. So that message came again and again. Then we need to cut spending, we need to cut government spending, etc., etc. And the fact that in this year he's still returning to this very discredited dogma that austerity is
Right.
what can save the country itself shows a lot about how bankrupt this government is in terms of policies. And we are looking at a crisis that is quite unprecedented in United Kingdom. We're talking about inflation which is at a 40-year high, and that's general inflation. If you look at transport inflation, for transport costs, for instance, they've risen at a much higher rate. The energy crisis is intense. By October, it's expected to increase even more. The number of people at food queues, at food banks, is really, really very high right now, especially when compared to last year. So across sectors, there is a massive, decline that the working population in the United Kingdom is facing. There is a dire need for more money in the hands of the people. There is a dire need for further spending by the government through various projects. For instance, there is a dire need to tax the rich, because the rich have been doing very well. But what the government is talking about is the possibility of tax cuts. So the fact is that there is a set of circumstances on the ground which call for immediate intervention. Rents, for instance, are quite high, and the increase has been quite dramatic and drastic. And so basically people do not have enough ways to feed themselves. They do not have enough ways to heat their homes. As basic necessities such as these, people are really struggling. And at this point of time, you have a government which is committed to conservatism, which basically in this case means cut government spending further. And we have information about how so many billions of dollars worth benefits has been cut in the last 10 years alone during various conservative governments. So this is a policy that is definitely heading towards a disaster. The trade unions, the leftist organizations have been continuously flagging it. There are a series of protests that are coming up on many of these issues, bringing together a cross-section of society who are very unhappy with what is happening. So this again sort of shows that Partygate is just, like I said, it is a phase. It is maybe the most visible phase of this discontent, of how distant the government is from the people. But its policies, I think especially its policies in the economic front demonstrated all the more. This government very comfortable blaming it on the Ukraine war, just as governments all over the world are blaming everything on the Ukraine war. But these policies have been going on for a very, very long time. Like I said, the benefits cut is about 10 years in the making. It's not something that started in February. So these are policies which are time and again failed. During COVID-19, we saw the NHS, National Health Service, come under a huge amount of stress, and the government solution was to come up with plans which would actually further increase their privatization rather than actually increasing the staff strength or recruiting more trained professionals. So these completely bankrupt policies, the government seems very inclined to continue with them. We're going to be seeing 2 by-elections in the coming weeks as well. That might again further intensify the political chaos. And like I said, all in all, it looks like Labour has a slight advantage right now, according to polls, despite the fact that they themselves have been, especially under the current leadership, have been moving away from policies that benefit the working class into a very colourless centrist position. But even they, according to most voters, look much better when compared to the mess the Conservatives are in.
All right, Prashant, thanks for your time. Mike Pompeo, former CIA director, has been summoned by a court in Spain. The summons relates to 2017, when America's CIA had allegedly hatched a plot to assassinate WikiLeaks founder and investigative journalist Julian Assange. The revelation came through a story published in Yahoo last September. In 2017, Assange was in London at the Ecuadorian embassy. The Spanish court is probing whether a Spanish security company spied on Assange. The Yahoo story said the CIA launched an all-out war against Assange after WikiLeaks released a top-secret hacking toolkit. We go over to Anish from People's Dispatch, who has been following this story. Anish, hi, thanks for joining us today. Anish, based on the news about the Spanish court, now these events took place during Trump administration, and from Assange's supporters, he had come under a lot of fire. Can you just tell us what this is all about?
Yeah, so let's first begin with the spying plot, because that is something that was first revealed, and that is the case in question in the Spanish court in the Asamblea Nacional, which is where a private company called UC Global, which is based out of Spain, was alleged to have worked with the United States to spy on Assange at the Ecuadorian embassy. So UC Global actually had a contract for security and surveillance management, and it was hired by the Ecuadorian government. So we are talking about another country and a private firm conspiring to undermine not only a journalist who was in sort of an exile and like in confinement because of that, but also to actually undermine the sovereign rights of another nation, because we are talking about an embassy being spied upon without the knowledge of the people uh, who run the embassy, right?
Right.
And so it is this case where they also we have the connection to the so-called assassination plot, because it was around the same time when the supposed discussions about rendition and also possible assassination of Assange was being discussed at the highest levels of the US government, which went all the way up to not only the director of the CIA, who was Mike Pompeo at the time, but also the White House. So apparently, the assassination possibilities were asked by the White House itself. So we are talking about a very serious allegation being raised, which was raised during the trial, the appeals trial that was happening against the extradition being denied by the lower court in the United Kingdom. And it was during this proceedings this revelations happened, and the courts did not really care to look for it, because we're talking about something very serious. And if you're going to hand it over to the same people who possibly conspired to assassinate you, this is putting the person in danger, and that is also something illegal to do.
Right. So, Anish, now during the extradition hearings, did this fact of the establishment in the US trying to assassinate him, trying to kidnap him, all these allegations, all these concerns, did it ever come up during the extradition hearings?
It did actually. As far as I understand, there was even a submission made by Assange's team that not only about the case that was happening in Spain, because we have to remember that these were not simply allegations. We're talking about proper reports being released. The assassination, the alleged assassination plot, and I'm using alleged because it is a sub judice case to begin with,
Right.
is primarily being was based on interviews, anonymous interviews by with senior intelligence and national security officers in the United States, about 30 of them, more than 30 of them. And so they were talking about it, and the narrative was consistent throughout. Not to mention that the Spanish court actually ran a secret investigation. The UC Global's director, David Morales, was actually arrested, and and he even confessed that he actually collected illegal data and sent it to the United States. And there is even a whistleblower from the United States who will also be summoned along with Pompeo to testify. So these, at least in the case of the spying operation that happened on Assange, the illegal spying, was actually based on literal facts, and it was even submitted not only during the appeals process but also during the first trials that happened, because that is
Mm-hmm.
when these things were revealed. You're talking, and in fact, I think it was revealed right before the Assange was arrested. So this is a process that was compromised from the beginning. You're talking about the US and using the data and the facts that they collected from not only about Assange's activities, his professional activities, but also his personal life, his family's information. Everything was collected. It was literally nothing that was not taken during that process of illegal spying, and it was based on that they used a whole lot of proper timing to actually do the, if not a rendition, but they actually did eventually arrest him, and he's being detained right now in London because of that. So there is a massive, it's not a conflict of interest, there is a massive problematic thing, because the petitioner for this extradition is now stands accused of not only trying to kidnap him, but also trying to persecute him, but also trying to considering to assassinate him in a foreign land, at a foreign land where of an ally nation to begin with.
Right.
So this is a whole lot of problematic things coming together, and it shows the way the U.S. Military intelligence infrastructure works. It doesn't really care for the ethics of anything. It doesn't care for diplomacy. It doesn't care. What it wanted at that point when the whole discussion happened was to was retribution for the revelations that happened. So
Right.
this is a political, kind of hounding that has actually happened since the beginning, and it is being seriously considered in a higher court in Spain. So that is something that was never considered and never even came out in the media. Let's begin with that.
So, Anish, you're talking about Vault 7 here.
Yeah, so the Vault 7 was a series of publications by WikiLeaks where it exposed dozens of hacking tools that the CIA has been using for a very long time. Now, when I say hacking, we are talking about extremely sophisticated hacking capabilities that can undermine not only operating systems of individuals, companies, corporations, and even countries, but also which can compromise systems that control your cars, your home appliances, your televisions, even your browsers. So, and these are things that the United States casually just had and never bothered to actually make them accountable for, in at least in some way, in some of the other democratic forums that exist for intelligence agencies in their country. So these, and it was just, it only gave a glimpse of the sort of hacking capabilities that the CIA had. I think something like 1996 of the 500 or so hacking tools only were released and exposed through the Vault 7 revelations. So it was a serious problem at the time, and also the United States was going through, this whole allegation of snooping on sovereign
Right.
heads of states and governments. So this was definitely something that was a major revelation that was made by WikiLeaks and Assange at the time.
All right. Thanks a lot for that update, Anish. There has been a chorus of criticism of India ever since two functionaries of the ruling Bharatiya Janata Party have made statements against Prophet Muhammad. Around 24 countries, including Saudi Arabia, Afghanistan, Indonesia, Pakistan, Qatar, Iran, the UAE, and the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, have objected to the remarks. In the face of this criticism, the BJP suspended these functionaries. We'll talk to Abdul from People's Dispatch about the incidents. Abdul, could you just walk us through what has happened? Some of these countries have good relations with India, and yet there is this sense of a crisis. What's actually happened?
Well, last week, one of the spokesperson of the ruling Bharatiya Janata Party government said something derogatory about Prophet Muhammad. And that basically, for a very long time, the opposition within the country was saying that the government should take some action against it. This should not go on. As we know that the government, BJP, has a particular ideology which is anti-minority, and the persecution of minorities have become a very common thing in India in last 8 years.
Right.
So in that context, there was an outcry. People were raising the issue, but nothing was happening. Suddenly, there was a social media outrage in some of the Gulf countries, which basically was taken into consideration by their governments, and they summoned the Indian ambassador. They issued official statements condemning the incident, and some of them asked formal apology from the government of India as well. So this was the context. Why these countries, which have, as you rightly pointed out, so far, because this is nothing new. India in this kind of, you can say, statements against minorities, violence against minorities, the attacks on people belonging to particular community is
Right.
happening for last 8 years. And this is nothing new. Why suddenly some of the countries decided to take action and demand formal apology is something which is very strange to explain at this moment. There are many speculations. We should not go into those speculations. We can say that the countries, for example, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Kuwait, which have very strong trade and political relationship with India, they are one of the largest trading partners. GCC, they are members of GCC,
Right.
and GCC is one of the largest trading partner with India. Millions of Indians live in these countries. They work there. They send millions of dollars in remittances to India. So this is something which is very difficult to explain. We can only think of one thing, that most of these countries have a very strong Muslim population, and I think the ruling classes there are worried about their own population, who is quite sentimental about Prophet's stature, and any insult to perceived or real insult to Prophet becomes an issue, and they don't want it to spill it over to other things, and that's why this action. This is the one way of looking at it, though there can be other reasons which are not very obvious, of course.
All right. And what about the Indian government's response to these countries?
Well, there are two kinds of response. If we see what has happened, immediately after some of the Gulf countries raised the issues with Indian government, particularly in the context that Indian Vice President is visiting one of the Gulf countries, that became a crucial thing. And therefore, Indian government, though Indian government did not do anything, the ruling party sacked both these spokespersons, and first they tried to defend that this has nothing to do with government of India. These are fringe, quote unquote, fringe elements.
Right.
But basically they were suspended from the party for 6 years. One of them have been terminated from the membership of the party as well. And they have tried to say that BJP is respectful about other religions, they respect sectarian differences and so on and so forth, which this is one set of response. The other set of response is basically in the context of OIC statement, Organization of Islamic Countries statement. After that, Government of India has basically said that this is an internal affair and they should not try to intervene. This is a very narrow-minded approach to issues raised in India, and these countries somehow they invoked the name of Pakistan as usual, that in Pakistan minorities are not treated well, and so on and so forth. So even in these two kind of responses, you will see that there is a contradictory, by and large contradictory approach adopted by the government of India. A large number of opposition in India is also raising the issue that this is a crime committed by the party, a particular party which has a particular ideology, which is anti-minority, which is based on hatred and all. It should not be seen as a crime committed by India as a nation. Hence, the demand raised by some of the countries of apology, a formal apology from the Indian state, is unfair. Different ways of looking at this particular issue of minority persecution. And of course, it is an issue when in a country, particularly in a country which is considered to be democratic, the human rights are violated. That should be taken seriously and it should be raised wherever possible. But defining what is convenient to take a position on and what is not convenient by a particular country should, though it has become a norm, should ideally not be in practice.
And that's all we have for today. Thank you for watching Daily Debrief. Please come back to us tomorrow and follow us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. And for more updates and analysis from around the world, visit peoplesdispatch.org.